Hello friends! This video is about how to make a Yakut knife from a metal file and a piece of branch. The knife is made in accordance with Northern knife making design, a simple handle and asymmetrical blade. One side of the blade is flat and has a groove called the fuller, while the other side has a convex edge and no groove. The knife has been used in Yakutia, a region in Siberia, for hundreds of years without significant changes in its design. I made its blade using my DIY anvil along with a forge made from a tin barrel and blowtorch. The essence of this Northern knife's design is its simplicity and functionality. Everything in this knife is about rationality. The Yakut is easily made and sharpened, yet hard to break. The blade's asymmetry is something to get used to, but such blade's shape is convenient for cutting operations as well as shaving and drilling wood. The bulky handle makes the Yakut easier to use in cold weather while wearing gloves or mittens. The fuller in the blade makes it lighter and conserves metal while maintaining the blade's strength. Also, the blade's groove simplifies its sharpening process. All you have to do to restore the blade's sharpness is to sweep its flat side across a sharpening stone a few times. The blade's sharpening angle always stays the same. There are many versions on how Yakut knife came about. I think its design descended from a more ancient bone knife. Imagine, when you struggle for survival every day in the extreme northern climate, you simply wouldn't have time to make a symmetrical blade from a large bone. You will just take a thick bone, split it and sharpen one side of it against a flat rock. Making any other blade shapes from a bone would make the knife weaker. Once you learn to work with metal, you would naturally forge this time-tested blade's design. But enough about the knife's history. Let's make a Yakut knife. I use an old metal file as a metal donor. Firstly, I sanded off its texture with a side grinder and cut it in half. The file's larger half will become a cutting edge for my bimetal bearded axe in the future. I will have a link to the axe making video below. Welding a rod to the smaller file's half makes the whole process easier. I heated the crude blade in my new DIY propane forge made of a tin barrel and a blowtorch. The new forge is a lot more powerful than the old one made of a tin can. I will shape the blade's tang later. Meanwhile, I will just give it a crude shape to be able to properly position the blade's fuller. Next, I will hammer one side of the blade with its cutting edge positioned away from me. If you're left-handed, you would still keep the cutting edge away from yourself while hammering. I'm hammering the cutting edge to shape both the blade's convex side and the cutting edge itself. As the blade swells and curves, I correct its geometry. Now I will shape the fuller. Heated U10 steel gets fairly soft. It is easier to start shaping the fuller with a sharp end of a small hammer. Once you have a crude groove, you can use this simple shaping tool and a heavier hammer for a more precise fuller positioning. If you don't have an assistant like me, you can use this old trick to hold the rod attached to the blade with your legs while forging. Of course, your anvil has to be low enough for the method. I've made my anvil as low as my thumb hanging down from my arm to be able to use this trick. As you can see, there is nothing difficult in shaping hot metal. The whole process is simple and intuitive. I decided to shape the tang using a traditional method, but it can also be shaped with a side grinder later. As my metal heat treatment experiments had shown, it is critical to properly normalize the blade. I did it by heating and then slowly cooling it to room temperature for about 6 hours. The process reduces internal metal stresses and hardness while increasing its ductility. Before the blade's tempering, I shaped and only partially sharpened its cutting edge to prevent micro cracks. Admittedly, once the blade is hardened, it is more difficult to sharpen it, but it is better to play it safe and keep the cutting edge dull for now. My forge was still hot as I just finished working on my bimetal bearded axe. So I heated up the Yakut's blade to about 750 Celsius, 1400 Fahrenheit, and submerged it into room temperature oil. Note: for selective tempering, I slowly submerged the blade's cutting edge into oil to give it more hardness. This way, the knife's cutting edge becomes harder and will keep its sharpness longer, while the blade's spine stays softer and fairly flexible. The blade can easily score this bottle because its cutting edge is in the high 50s of the Rockwell range. The sound is clear, which means there are no internal cracks and we can move on to the next test. The final test requires the blade to carry my weight without cracking or permanently bending. My 3mm 1/8 of an inch blade has passed my quality control without cracking or losing its geometry, and we can move on to making a handle for it. In my previous video about using a fishing line made from a plastic bottle to catch trout, I promised to make a knife's handle from this green rotted branch. I will try two different resins on two different workpieces. I stabilized one blank with a thermosetting polymer called Anacrol 90. Once cured, the polymer added yellowish color to the wood and changed its color from light green to brownish. While applying vacuum and squeezing out air bubbles from the blank's pores, the rotted wood barely consumes the polymer. However, once the pressure in the vacuum chamber is normalized, the blank sucks the Anacrol in like a sponge, replacing air in its pores with liquid polymer. The Anacrol impregnated blank changed its color and became 2 to 3 times heavier by feel. To polymerize this thermosetting resin, I wrapped the workpiece in foil and heated it up to 90 degrees Celsius, 200 Fahrenheit. The fact that Anacrol polymerizes only in higher temperatures is very convenient. However, it can also change the wood's color, which is a downside in some cases. The second piece of the rotted branch was stabilized using a polyether resin. Once the wood was impregnated with the resin, I discovered that the green color was preserved. It just got darker. After all, I decided to use the Anacrol stabilized brownish handle for this project. As for the green blank, I added a bolster made from a coin to it and put it away for now. It will be a handle for another knife. Northern knives have a hidden wedged tang handle design, so the first step would be to drill a deep hole slightly deeper than the blade's tang. Then I filed 2 slots for the blade. I didn't want to use glue or epoxy resin for blade mounting, so I made a dowel of the same diameter as the drilled hole, cut it in 2 halves, and fine-tuned the wedge's feet. Admittedly, it would have been much easier to use 2 loose wedges and glue, but I'm not looking for easy ways and wanted to stick to traditional methods. So my wedges will have to have a perfect fit in order to tightly hold the blade's tang inside the handle without splitting it. I was able to achieve a perfect fit on my 4th try. Luckily, I had enough length in the handle so I could cut it shorter 3 times to achieve a perfect fit. Finally, I cut the handle to 111 mm, 4.5 inches long, and polished it with a flannel rag. The stabilized handle was easily polished and shines a nice gloss. Unfortunately, it is hard to describe the tactile sensation you experience while holding this primitive knife. It feels so good in your palm, you don't want to let it go. If you liked this video, Perhaps you could share it with your friends. Let good people watch good videos. This is Maxi Gorov, St. Petersburg, Russia. And a final note. I only produce 1 or 2 videos max a month, and if you don't want to miss new content like this, you can click on the bell reminder for notifications. I hope to see you back on Advoco Makes.